In a world that shifts quietly, where power doesn't always roar, but sometimes whispers, a new story has begun between Japan, the United States, and Canada. It's not a story about war, nor about grand political speeches. It's a story about the quiet, gradual, yet unstoppable rewriting of the global economic order. It all started quietly, without fanfare, without conferences or televised announcements. But the impact, it was nothing short of an earthquake at the heart of the American trade system. Washington had its dream. A familiar dream, to bring back the golden age of American manufacturing, to make the words "Made in America" shine again across the world. Factories humming, workers back at their stations, steel being poured, and the American engine roaring back to life. But reality, as it often does, had other plans. Just when Washington thought the tide was turning, Tokyo made its move, a calm, deliberate move, typical of Japanese strategy. Japan quietly announced that its new production facilities, the ones meant to serve the North American market, wouldn't be built in the United States. They would be built in Canada. That single decision sent shockwaves through Washington. Inside the White House, people were asking the same question. Why Canada? Why now? To find the answer, we need to rewind. Because this moment wasn't born overnight, it was the result of years of simmering economic tension, and one miscalculated policy that changed everything. It began with a familiar name. Subaru, the Japanese automotive giant, long admired for reliability and technological precision, made a bold strategic shift. It decided to change how it supplied the Canadian market. Instead of assembling its cars in American factories, Subaru would rely more on its Japanese plants. The reason wasn't quality, it was cost. After the Trump administration imposed heavy tariffs on steel and aluminum under the banner of protecting American industry, something unexpected happened. Costs inside the United States began to skyrocket. Materials got more expensive. Assembly costs rose, and for many foreign, even domestic manufacturers, producing within America stopped making economic sense. The tariffs were meant to spark a renaissance in U.S. manufacturing, but instead, they made America one of the most expensive places to build things. Subaru was the first to act. Rather than absorb the rising costs, it decided to relocate part of its Canadian market production back to Japan. The company would export ready-made cars directly to Canada, bypassing America's tariff wall entirely. That smart, quiet move opened a much bigger question. If building inside America no longer makes sense, where should companies go next? And suddenly, all eyes turned north, to Canada, the quiet neighbor who had always stood in the background of the world's theater, now stepping silently into the spotlight. While Washington was making noise about trade wars, Canada was doing something very different, preparing step by step behind the scenes. It was laying the groundwork for a new trade reality, and at the center of that groundwork stood one man, Mark Carney. Economist, thinker, strategist. Carney understood what most policymakers ignored. In an age of global uncertainty, the most valuable commodity isn't oil or gold, it's trust. So he didn't declare wars or call for boycotts. He didn't raise his voice. He simply opened the door and said to the whole world, "Come here. We have stability. We have clear laws. Work with us, and you'll win." That calm invitation changed the map. While the U.S. was tweeting its way through trade disputes and headline wars, Canada was quietly signing real agreements, one after another, each one making it stronger, more relevant, and more respected. This is where the real difference shines. While America was speaking the language of strength, Canada was all about building partnerships. And that difference, subtle as it seems, was massive in effect. One by one, major players like Japan, Malaysia, and China began shifting their investments to Canada, not because it was richer, nor because it had lower wages, but because it offered something far more valuable: predictability. In Canada, a company could plan 10 years ahead, confident that no tweet, no sudden tariff, no overnight rule would change the entire game. And in a world that had grown weary of chaos, that predictability became power. Reports from major think tanks like Brookings and the IMF confirmed it. Canada, along with Mexico, had become the preferred destination for industries escaping the high costs of the U.S. market. Nowhere was this more visible than in autos and clean energy. Canadian ports like Vancouver started seeing exponential growth in trade volume. Vancouver became a critical hub in the supply chains connecting Asia to North America. Meanwhile, both Japan and China began to view Canada as a safe economic corridor, far removed from Washington's political storms. Quietly, the game was changing. What had once been a wonder world, with America as the only gateway to Western markets, now had an alternative, and it was a stable, calm, reasonable one: Canada. Inside America, the mood began to sour. Factories in Detroit and Ohio scaled back production. Industrial projects were postponed. General Motors and Stellantis temporarily reduced workforces, citing higher production costs and declining domestic demand. The very policies meant to protect Made in America were instead fueling Made in Canada. And across the border, Ottawa was seizing the opportunity with remarkable tact. While Washington's tone was that of confrontation, Ottawa's was cooperation. When the U.S. withdrew from trade deals, Canada was joining new ones. One of them stood out: the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP. This agreement linked Canada directly with some of Asia's fastest-growing economies: Japan, Malaysia, Vietnam, opening a golden gateway between the Pacific and the Atlantic. With Japan on board, the message was unmistakable. The future of trade didn't have to revolve around Washington anymore. Then came the moment that crystallized everything. At an economic summit in Kuala Lumpur, Mark Carney said a simple but profound sentence: "Canada is ready. We'll talk to America when America is ready, but we won't wait forever." Those words echoed far beyond the conference hall. They marked a turning point, a declaration that leadership in the 21st century isn't reserved for the loudest voice, but for the most reliable hand. Europe listened. Asia was all ears. And from that point on, newspapers around the world began talking about the Canadian doctrine: diplomacy through calm, power through consistency, and influence through results. Today, you can see the shift on every trade map. The major shipping lines between Asia and North America no longer end exclusively in Los Angeles or Seattle. They now route through Vancouver, Halifax, and Montreal. Investment from Japan and China flows into Canada at record levels. And while Ottawa quietly builds new partnerships across Asia, Washington struggles with internal challenges, political divides, rising costs, and industries unsure about where to go next. It's almost poetic. The country that once led the free world now finds itself chasing the calm neighbor it used to overlook. Because while America tried to reclaim greatness through noise and pressure, Canada pursued influence through patience and trust. That's the quiet revolution unfolding before our eyes. The numbers tell the story too. Canadian exports to Asia are at historic highs. Foreign direct investment has surged, and surveys of global businesses consistently rank Canada among the most stable and predictable economies in the world. Meanwhile, industries within the U.S., especially autos and energy, continue to grapple with cost overruns and policy uncertainty. The dream of a revived industrial golden age is fading into a humbler reality. In the end, this is not just a trade story. It's all about mindset, strategy over slogans, calm over chaos, and teamwork over power. Japan understood it early. Canada executed it perfectly. And now, the world is following their lead. So what is the lesson here? If America once led by pride, Canada is now leading by trust. If others once feared missing out on being close to Washington, they now want to be close to Ottawa. Because in a world growing weary of volatility, the strongest partner is no longer the loudest one. It's the one that offers peace of mind. Perhaps that's the ultimate irony of our era. Power today isn't measured in noise, but in stability. And sometimes, silence can shake the world more deeply than a shout ever could. So, remember this. The story of Japan and Canada isn't about cars or trade tariffs. It's about a new global truth: that the nations which move thoughtfully, consistently, and confidently are the ones rewriting the future. It's not about who claims to be first, it's about who acts like they belong there. And in this quiet, steady revolution, Canada has chosen its role. Not a follower, not a competitor, but a calm architect of the new world order. So the next time you hear the noise of trade wars and sanctions, remember how the real power moves. Not with force, not with shouting, but step by step, signature by signature, building trust, brick by brick. Because in today's world, credibility is the new currency, and Canada just became its central bank. That's the story of Echoes of Power. A story not of wars fought, but of choices made. A story of how nations rise, not by shouting louder, but by thinking deeper. In the end, this quiet shift between Japan, Canada, and the United States isn't just a story about trade, it's a reminder that real power often moves in silence. As the world grows louder, the nations that think carefully, plan patiently, and act consistently are the ones reshaping the future. And in this new landscape, Canada isn't just participating, it's leading. Now, here's the question I want to leave you with. Do you think America can adapt to this new era of stability-driven power? Or will countries like Canada continue to rewrite the rules while Washington struggles to catch up? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious where you think the future of global power is heading.